Hi, in this short video, I'm going to talk about globalization and global strategies, or how to go from small to big to huge. We're going to talk about what are globalization strategies. Well, there are primarily four, and I'm going to talk about them in increasing risk, expense, and difficulty. First is import-export, which is basically shipping products, either as finished goods or components. Indirect import-export, you're using a broker or agent to handle the sourcing and other import-export processes, whereas in direct import-export, you're bringing that process internally into your company. Now, the advantage of indirect is that using an agent or broker is someone who is already involved in the process, who has the expertise and contacts for successful transactions. Think of it as networking. It's who you know, but more importantly, who knows you. Now, dealing in foreign countries does require knowing the culture and the legal contacts and legal contracts. But more importantly, it's knowing who is really capable and trustworthy of consistently filling your needs during the time of which you're going to need that production. Indirect import-export is the easiest, fastest, and while not something you start overnight, in relative terms, it's pretty much just order it and ship it. Well, there may be trade regulations involving tariffs or duties and perhaps regulatory issues on chemicals such as lead paint or food coloring or emissions controls on diesel engines in the U.S. are not required in lesser developed countries. But overall, direct import and export is the easiest and lowest risk method of going global because the only risk you have is tied to the shipment and the product you have in inventory. If you're going up that risk and expense ladder, the next step up is licensing, which is very similar to licensing here in the United States. The most common license in the United States is probably the franchise. Now, franchise typically involves the use of intellectual property such as a patent or manufacturing process or often a brand. Well, let's say you have developed the best process in the world for making liquid platinum batteries. Well, this works if you have a brand with a powerful image, but in this case, your process or product is key and unique and will provide the licensee a high ROI. But you should know that after the contract, there may be issues. If you have just trained a workforce and management team and a supply chain on your intellectual property a long way away from here with probably less protection for you in the courts because you're one of those people who aren't from around here. Now, there is good news though. This approach, licensing, tends to bring revenue in without significant cost because you are being paid for your intellectual property. And as marketers, we should be aware that there could be an impact to our domestic brand if the foreign brand is damaged through bad product or marketing, but this can be a way to increase revenue without increasing costs. Now, a joint venture is the next step up the risk and expense ladder, and it's like a marriage, but with a contract. When that contract in a joint venture outlines the specific skills and expertise and assets brought to the table by each partner. Some countries have very tight import restrictions, and a joint venture often gets around that because you have a local partner. Joint ventures are very popular in heavy manufacturing industry where large facilities are needed and a large upfront capital requirement will be necessary to build that facility. It's also helpful sometimes if you're dealing with specialized markets or markets that might be hard to access without a local presence. One thing to look out for is that most joint ventures have some sort of profit splitting process or formula. We have to remember that profit is actually calculated by accounting. And as the United States changes from its accounting standard of FASB and GAAP to IFRS or the International Finance Reporting Standards, there may be changes in the level of profitability simply due to the theory behind how we report revenue expenses. So just like your new spouse, you definitely do not want to get into a money argument with your joint venture partner. You want a clear understanding of how revenue and expenses are going to be recorded and shared across the partnership. However, if we look historically over the past 20 years, joint ventures have become very popular both for United States companies investing in foreign countries and foreign companies investing in the United States. Now, the most capital-intensive and risky global option is direct investment. This means you're going to that foreign country and you're building a plant and hiring local workers. Now, this is usually done where the other market has a significant cost advantage and or the cost of shipping a product or component is very high relative to the price of that component or product. Now, this strategy, which is direct capital investment, is most risky because you now have a $50 million or a $500 million building custom built to produce your product. Now, this looks really good to foreign markets because you're hiring construction workers to build that multi-million, multi-hundred million dollar building, and you're then hiring manufacturer workers from the local markets, and you're probably also going to be making infrastructure improvements. But especially for us in marketing, we need to be aware of the risks of outsourcing jobs from the United States to other markets and the impact that has had on several significant, well-known brands in the United States. Now, once you have your globalization strategy in place, it's time to move to the product decision. And the marketing mix is just as relevant in a foreign market as a domestic market. But we'll leave the discussions of price, place, and promotion for another day and focus here on product. We want to keep in mind that the global decision still requires a complete market understanding for price, place, and promotion. But starting with product, we need to know how we're going to be impacted by that other market. One option, similar to domestic growth, is to just simply adjust your product through straight expansion to send them the product internationally exactly like we produce here with no changes from the product in the domestic market. They get the same thing we get. This is going to be the least expensive option, the easiest to manage, and the resulting product may or may not fit the exact. But the problem is the resulting product may or may not fit that other market. It's a trade-off of cost and benefits. What you're doing is you're amortizing your cost of production here over a longer print run or a longer production run. Printing was my background, so I say print. But the problem is there's a big risk in parochialism, which is thinking that what we have here is good enough for someone over there. Now, that's a very bad approach to take, very risky. It should only be done after a thorough examination of that target market and that foreign country to make sure we completely understand any dominating buyer preferences. The second option is to go into product adaptation. This is the next most expensive and difficult option for product development. And here you might modify your domestic product for specific local preferences, maybe such as size, color, or the addition or deletion of features. It's possible that these changes may already be something worked out in engineering that you found did not work domestically. So therefore, you've already spent the R&D dollars and they weren't wasted. You could even end up with several different variations when you look at what's going to be expected or desired in a foreign market. However, product adaptation does amortize that initial product development cost, and it can be completed reasonably quickly with relatively low investment, so it can be a very good strategy if you have a product which is easily adaptable and modifiable to other variations for other markets. The most expensive product option is product invention. That's basically starting with a clean blank sheet of paper and you're creating something entirely new. This is going to be the slowest and most expensive option, but may result in the best fit because your product is going to be specialized for that foreign market, including preferences in color, texture, size, whatever those options are, it's going to be developed with that other market in mind. Regardless of your strategy, it's very important to thoroughly study that market. There's a famous but still valid story about the Chevy Nova introduced in Mexico. Chevy, in a not very rare moment of pure parochialism, introduced the Nova in Mexico. But in Mexico, they speak Spanish, and Nova is a combination of two words which means no-go. As can be expected in hindsight, sales of a no-go vehicle did not go very well. Now, I have many students in this class say, my company is not impacted by globalization. Really? Have you looked at your customer demographics lately? Their nationality? Have you looked at your subproduct and your supply chain? Where some of your components are actually made? In a day when x-rays are sent by digital files and read 12,000 miles away by highly qualified doctors, your company is affected by globalization. You work for a not-for-profit? Fine. Your donor base is changing through immigration, which is a part of globalization, and it's changing, and so perhaps is your service base, which is who is using your product. So regardless of the question of what you can learn from globalization strategies, go back to marketing your product with adaptation or invention, or service adaptation or service invention, and look at how to grow your customer base, understanding the process of looking at changing your product based on consumer or customer preference, which is what happens in a global market, and looking at the supply chain issues of globalization and seeing how those strategies and that learning has impacted your local product and your local market.